All right, slightly different background. It's because it's raining. I guess everything happens in Rio. So, by the way, 2 episodes ago, I made a mistake. We did not, I edited the video, but I didn't edit the audio correctly. So you heard me losing my shit on it. I'm sorry. That was supposed to be taken out. I was losing my shit at the dogs. Actually, I have 2 puppies, pit bulls. They are adorable. They are 4 months old. They eat everything around the house. They need to be with me at all times. And I mean all times. And the podcast, like the 165, I had to redo it 5 times. You heard me lose my shit because that was the 5th time. They were at the door scratching and crying because they wanted to be with me. I won't lie, I vented a little bit. I won't lie, it felt really good. But someone reached out and said like they actually, I lost them on this because they heard me scream. It wasn't on my kid. It was just at the 2 puppies. I did not hit them or anything. I just screamed at them. They ran away. I closed the door. I came back and finished the podcast. It felt really good. I won't lie. So yeah, I do that sometimes. Anyway, welcome back. Episode 3062, I think. Today, so last week I had another good question, a good comment about the podcast about the Q training, saying like this is awesome material. Thank you, by the way, all that stuff, but it's very hard to apply to training. All right, let's make today about a training application. So, what is fundamentally the key to the key of the Q training, and where does that lead us? All right, so the key of the Q training is that Q, that fail, and the point is going to be to avoid that fail at all costs. Now, that brings a question. Where is the fail? Is the fail simply like, like the rate of perceived exertion, which means I could do 10 reps, but I'm only going to do 9. It feels like I put 90% of my energy into that rep, things like this. Yes and no. So, Q-1, for example, is I want you to stop 1 rep short of the fail. So we could see it as an RPE system. But I'm going to go a little bit further than that into what the fail is. The fail can also be like the technique did not feel good. The fail can be I just didn't like that rep. So let me take you through an example so I stay practical. When I do isolation work, I like compound movements better. If you are following the Q training template that I have on Mighty Networks, you see a lot of compound movements even as assistance work. Like right now, my squat session 2 days ago was squat, then pause squats, then sumo deadlift, then stiff leg, then leg press. And that was my session. A lot of it you're going to see is something like that. But sometimes we do need isolation for muscles that do not want to join the party. In that case, that happens to be the left hammy for me toward the knee, like this part right there. And external torque on my left is a problem. So I have the external torque, so the outside hammy needs to be worked, but there's also that toward the knee part of the issue, the hamstring, and I decide to train it. So I go in the gym, and in that case, I do sets of usually 15 reps, 20 reps, very, very light, right? Like 2-3 plates, like a girly weight, right? And the point of this exercise is I'm going to stretch, contract. So when I contract, I'm pretending I'm pausing, like it's a bodybuilding show, and I'm pausing to show the muscle, the roundness of the muscle. In my case, the non-roundness of my left hammy, because I have no legs. But I'm imagining, focusing on showing that muscle to, let's say, a judge. Like this is actually an exercise you could do just posing, by the way. Side note, rabbit hole is a very important thing. My friend Sam Dancer, we were at a Invictus training camp, and he was telling me, like, for the longest, because he comes from a physique background, right? Bodybuilding, like on stage, and his coach would make him do like the tricep pose, side pose, right? And made him start with his calf that he had to contract for 5 seconds. Then it would be the calf into the hamstrings, 5 seconds, 5 seconds, 10. Then it would be the calf into the hamstring, into the quad. Then the calf into the hamstring, into the quad, into the glute. Then the quad into the hamstring, calf into hamstring, into quad, into glute, into oblique. And he would move that all the way up to tricep and come back down. So he'd be cramping everywhere by the time he was down. But Sam had, out of all the athletes that I've seen, the best muscle control. Like Sam could find any muscle anywhere in his body at will. And you could see his performance, you could see how strong he was, how tough he was. when it came to working, he could make anything work. Why? Because he had such good understanding, such good feel of his body, understanding where the muscle were, how they move, how to contract each almost individually. And how did he do that? Through that practice of bodybuilding. So when I do isolation work, for me, it's a little bit the same idea. I'm going to stretch the muscle fully, contract. Do not care about the weight, right? And then I do reps, let's say, of 15. What is interesting about that is, do I do a Q-1 in that one? Yes, I do a Q-1. But where is the Q? The Q is not rep-wise. For example, when I stop, I could always do at least 3 more reps on that exercise. If I wanted to, probably 5. But I stop because I stop before the exercise starts to feel differently. At first, I stretch, I contract. It feels good, like I have a good contraction of the muscle, I'm posing. And at some point, I start to lose the thread mentally. My mind is going somewhere else. I'm losing, call it what you want, the focus, whatever. I'm losing the thread. It does not, the connection isn't there anymore. This is when I stop the set. Could I keep on moving and do more reps? Yes, I could. But that's not the point, because I'm already, if I'm at that stage where I'm losing the thread, I've already failed. So I want to stop before that. And because it's a Q-5, or, you know, in that spirit, or Q-1 in the sense of, I'm going to stop 1 rep short of failing, but I'm not failing physically, I'm failing more like mentally in that sense, right? I'm going to do far more sets. Then I do 5 or 6 sets and just keep on going, because the key of that exercise for me is to find the muscle, right? Is to stretch and contract, like a bodybuilder, like a Kai Green explains all the time, creating that connection. When I do my compound lifts, I do more than 1 set per set idea, which means I'll do 5 reps, 6 reps, 8 reps, Q-1, because I will load heavy. So usually the Q-1 means physical and mental fail at the same time, whereas isolation is more mental fail. And I will apply the same mindset, but that 1 set per set mindset, which means I'm going to have 1 technique, 1 rhythm, no reset in that set, right? So that means that, what does it mean? You know, like you do inclined dumbbell presses, bench press for 8 reps or whatever. Like the first 4 reps, you get into a nice rhythm and you keep pushing. And maybe on the 4th rep, 5th rep, you decide to, you know, take a breather and then get 2 more reps or whatever. You'll notice that once you take a break, either mentally or physically, and then redo, like the form of the exercise changes. It doesn't feel the same. It might look exactly the same, but it doesn't feel the same. So to me, in that case, it's not the same set anymore. So what I do on all this is I keep pushing, but never stopping, never resetting mentally or physically, which means I'm going to do the same rep, but more importantly, it's not just that the bar keeps moving, or the dumbbell or the sandbag, it's that the technique, the rhythm is exactly the same. It feels the same, it moves the same. And then I do as many reps as I can, all the way up to Q-1 for that exercise. Main lift is going to be a little bit the same idea, in usually in the fact that I cannot lose technique on that. So the second I feel like I'm going to have to, you know, like hedge, compromise my position, like over tension, like the tension is not being preserved in the right muscle the way I want, that's my fail, right? So that's where it gets tricky in a way, is that there are many different types of fail, right, out there. So how are you going to find out yours? Very good question. And that's really the key to everything, right? Where is your fail? So there are different ways to do this. But first, let's explain the fail. As I was saying in the last podcast, the fail really is that thread system that you have integrated. That's what your sense of self is. It's a thread system that is identifying something as a threat. That is not the same as saying that you don't like something. You can hate something and not see it as a threat, right? You can have very high emotions. You can be in a very high emotional state, and it's still not a threat. It's still not seen as a threat. You still won't see the lactate levels going up. What do I mean by that? One of my coach, Ben, is in Australia, and he's a rabid fan of rugby, and his team was playing. And by the way, his team was playing. It might be American. It might be Australian football, or it was rugby. I don't even know. Sorry, Ben. Anyway, yeah, his team was playing, and it's something that matters a lot to him. He puts a lot of emotion into that one. And so it was a tough game, you know, like very, very tight and everything. So lots of emotion that just got him, you know, super hyped up. And he tested his lactate after the game, and he was at 1.1. That means that his very heightened emotional state, where you can be sure he jumped out of that chair for 2 hours nonstop, right? resulted in no levels of lactate. No, it didn't crash because his team won and he was happy. It was as high as that emotional state was, it was never a threat to the sense of self. And this is what I'm discovering more and more, is that those lactate levels that spike like this indicate a threat at the sense of self level. So there seems to be really two sides to this. The one side is, I don't like this, I don't want this, right? It's a bit like the want versus need conversation. It's like, I don't want that, I don't like that. That is not considered a threat. What is a threat is something where suddenly your sense of self is being integrated into it, going like, that thing right there, I can't have that. And then we see the levels of lactate. How would you know the difference between the two? Well, that's where the lactate testing comes in. And it is surprising how it is near impossible to identify the difference between the two without the lactate. So some people are asking me, what if I don't have a lactate tester? Buy one. I'm not kidding. Like, it's very, very hard to know the difference without it. Client of one of my coaches, we go through, and she thought like the level of lactate were high because of social thing. It was a competition, people were looking at me, stuff like that. So we look at 4 weeks of lactate testing, and we see very specific 5 cases of a spike. And by that, I mean normally a workout is 10, 12 millimole, and suddenly I see 18, 20, 22. So very, very high levels of lactate, past acidosis. And so we're like, all right, so let's look at this. And what we saw in those workouts, where some of them were not necessarily with people around, so it wasn't that. Well, we saw that every single workout had the overhead press into it. I was like, oh, that's very interesting. At the competition, it was a ball slam, so she had to lift it up first and then go forward. And then the other one were push presses, either dumbbell or barbell or stuff like that. Every time there was that type of workout, the lactate would spike. And so we start talking, and after 20 minutes, I started to go, so every time it's an overhead. Let me ask you something, like, do you go to your trap on the overhead? She goes, a lot, like position over tension, head through, all that stuff. It's like, is your neck hurting? And she goes like, well, yeah. It's like, is it that? Is it you don't like when your neck hurts? And at first he was like, oh, I'm tough, I can take it. I'm like, you can take it. Obviously you've been doing it, but that's not what I'm asking. What I'm asking is, do you not like it? And in the sense of, no, I don't like it. Do you not like it? As in like, it scares you inside. There's a threat, right? So, and after talking a while and she got comfortable, she was like, yeah, like, I don't like it when my neck hurts like that. I feel it the next day and it worries me because, and then you could see it was there. It was in that specific pain in her neck. It just worries her. It's a true threat to the sense of, true threat, which manifests in a sense of self. And that was the reason of the spike. It wasn't for her, it was the social stuff because she hates when people look at her. But it wasn't that. It was that fear of the neck because over time, who knows? And then the whole build-up was there, and that's very unique to the person because me, it's not that, it's joints. Like, when my shoulder suddenly with boxing, I was like, ow, ow, I did not like it. So that made me get up and fix it and proper grip and all of this because this I don't like. Why? Because suddenly I can't do what I want. So it's someone telling me what to do, and with difficult youth, I don't like when people tell me what to do. It's not associated with good things. And I can feel myself raising right away. And so me, it's the joint pain that gets me. Her, it was the neck. You, maybe it's your knee. Maybe it's your lower back. Maybe whenever you feel your back, it makes you freak out. I don't know. The thing is, most likely you don't know either. You might hate it, but it might not be seen by your body as a threat. So how do we know? Lactate testing. Lactate testing has been a revelation for me because it has put all my work into a frame of work I can do. Here comes a tropical storm. Oh my God, I hope the podcast won't be cut short, but when it rains here, it rains. Anyway, so the lactate testing was a major thing because suddenly I have a way to identify the threat. Why does it matter? Because that threat, that sense of self-manifestation is the bridge from fight to flight. We saw that, like Wim was commenting on the last podcast where he was talking about his study and everything. That's what we saw every time. There's the switch from fight to flight. And the whole idea of the Q training is to not go into flight. That's the point. So how do we do that? We find what is a true threat to your system, and you're never going to go there. So that means what? That means for the client who has neck pain, that means we're going to press the sandbag until the mobility is good enough that she can go overhead with the barbell without going to her traps and fucking up her neck. So clean and jerk, can you do a clean and jerk? I know you want to do a clean and jerk, but the question is, can you do a clean and jerk? And if you cannot, then we press a sandbag forward if we have to without locking it out for now, because you don't have the mobility to do it. But what matters the most is that I understand that you want to do it, but it doesn't matter. Whenever the neck shows up, it spikes you, it puts you into flight. If you spend, and you have to understand, the flight is where the anxiety lives. If you keep putting yourself into flight, that's what that feeling of anxiety is. It's flight because it's non-resolved action, right? So if you're in fight, you're going at the source of the anxiety, you'll be fine. The problem is when you're in flight. That's where bad things happen because, and I hate to say bad, worse things happen because from flight, after a while, your body will not be able to sustain it, will look for reason to evade the flight, and the number one way to do it is to go to freeze. So flight will lead to freeze. You're in the wrong hierarchy. You're going the wrong way on the what we call the phylogenetic hierarchy. What we need is that fight flow. Flow, fight, flow, depending of where we are, but that's what we need. Whenever you switch to flight, it's hard to come back to fight. It can be very, very hard. Usually, it requires stopping, going to freeze in order to come back. So the key of the Q training is to not go into flight. And if you don't go into flight, then the magic happens. And what am I talking about? So I want to talk training, and so we're going to talk volume today. Volume of training and fatigue. Lots of CrossFitters out there, you know what I mean when we say volume of training. CrossFit has introduced the highest volume of intensity work we have ever seen, right? With the results to back it up, by the way. Like we've seen progress in women on strength and capacity that we have never seen before. Always give credit where credit is due. CrossFit did change the way we train women forever. Greg Glassman created something truly revolutionary, right? So we have to keep the idea behind that. But a main issue that we see with that is we see people crashing, right? We see people being fatigued. We call it adrenal fatigue, freeze mode, whatever. At the end, it doesn't matter. There's a reason to all this, and that's what I want to talk about today. That's what's from a paper that I posted on the Vault that was summarizing something I've been working on for a very long time, and that was showing that actually there is that fatigue that we feel is actually not fatigue in the way we think of it, like my body cannot do such and such. It's actually a freeze mode, and the freeze mode is being created, right? We crash into the freeze mode through flight because of a somatic error left unchecked. So don't worry, it will all make sense. I'm going to unpack all this and make it into a overall idea. So where do I start? So fatigue, like we think it's a muscular thing. Let's start with that. And turns out it is not. And there's a problem there in misunderstanding what fatigue is, because if you think it's just your body being wiped out, then just eat carbs and you'll be fine. And we see that mentality all the time. This has been tested where if we look at the body being wiped out, that's easy. That's the contraction rate of a muscle, its capacity to contract and how hard it can contract. That can be measured, and it was. So we measure the rate of contraction, we introduce carbs, and we see zero. It made no difference in the recovery of the muscle. The person felt more recovered, but that was because of a nervous system thing. The muscle itself did not recover. What allowed the muscle to recover was a combination of body temperature being up, lactate, and adrenaline. Very interestingly speaking. So what does that mean? That will be for another podcast. But I wanted to approach that first. Is your idea of fatigue is incorrect. First of all, it's not your body being wiped out. And you don't need more carbs. You don't need more coffee or anything like that. Your nervous system does not want to move forward. That's what your fatigue is. So why does it want to move forward? Why is it in freeze? So it turns out we studied this on, the paper showed that they were studying that on chronic fatigue. Whenever you study a case, you never want to study in the center because things get fuzzy. There's too many variables, things are not just clear enough. So you need to study things in the extremes. So if you want to look at fatigue, a very good way to see that is chronic fatigue. People that are constantly so tired. And it's not from physical activity, because they will tell you they don't do any. They completely crash. And that's something you hear about adrenal fatigue and stuff like that. It takes a year to recover. Sorry, but it has nothing to do with the adrenals. The adrenals were taxed, but not from the reason that you think. That's not where that fatigue comes from. It comes from a somatic error left unchecked. We saw that with the chronic fatigue. We saw that through interoception. It's that somatic error. So what does that mean? So what happens was your system is based on prediction versus observation, even at unconscious levels, at the lower hierarchies. So imagine you're driving, right, and you see a ball passing in front of you. Right away, you'll start thinking, ball, that might mean kids. So you'll slow down, hopefully anyway. At least you'll pay more attention. You start to look in case a kid comes in. That's how the system works. It's exactly like when you're driving, you're always looking around because you can never be sure that there's not an asshole coming at you, right? So you're always trying to predict what if. That's what you do when the ball crosses. You go, what if, right? And then based on that, you're going to adapt your way of driving. Technically, the environment hasn't changed. The environment is always the same. There's just a ball crossing, and the ball has no effect on you. It's what the ball means that you're dealing with, and it means that a kid might be running after it. And that's how the system works, right? So whenever we see a prediction at the lower levels and conscious, which means the body trying to predict if it's hot or not, if it's a a million thing per millisecond. It's the wind, it's the temperature, it's the moisture in the air. That's just outside, right? Noise, vision, cues, dynamic changes. Short to long. Inside is your heart. How is it beating? How fast? The time that HRV, right? The blood pressure going through your veins, like this. That's why it's unconscious, because you just can't process all of it, right? But it's being done continuously in the back. And the production is always trying to understand the means. So the body feels the ball, like the heart, but what does it mean? Does it mean the kid is trying to figure out what comes next? When there is a difference between that prediction versus the observation, which means the result of actually what is actually happening, that's called a somatic error. Your system has automated systems in place to deal with that somatic error, trying to correct it by either changing the predictions, changing the feeling, or acting on the world. And it's all on an automated way, like you're not necessarily conscious about. Like your breathing might change, right? Your breathing rhythm might change. Your heart rate changes, right? Suddenly you go faster, lower. You have no control over that. It just happens because your body is reacting to certain things. HRV changes based on what happens. It's not a conscious thing, but it does happen. So you have a lot of automated system in place to deal with that somatic error, going like, well, this happened, but this happened, and then so how do I deal with it? And then he makes an assumption of the cause of the somatic error and tries to act on it so that the next time there's less somatic error. And so everything is based on the next time. So everything is a learning mechanism, right? So I go into a sauna, it's at 100, I expect a certain temperature. It happens that my sauna is actually not that hot. So I know it's not 100, it's 90. So the next time I go in, I will have a different feel of the temperature in the sauna. I expected it to be 100, but it's actually lower. And so those are adjustments that are made constantly. But understand, they are not being made on a conscious level. They are made on an unconscious level. You are not aware of it. Those are the lower hierarchies, automated systems. So whenever they find a situation where that automation of dealing with a somatic error does not work, which means that the somatic error is still there, like there's still a gap between that prediction and observation that just won't go away. And if anything, it gets worse. It's actually really, really bad. When you get into a somatic error that is left unchecked like that, it has a tendency to derail the entire system. So this is something the body is very aware of. So whenever a somatic error is not being corrected through the automated system, it is brought up the hierarchies. And eventually, you get to the hierarchies that are making up the conscious system, which means that somatic error is brought up to the conscious mind, going like, hey, an action is happening that we cannot correct. So we are bringing it up to you, the most evolved part of the self, the cognition levels, the conscious levels, because we need to make an executive decision as to what is causing this. And that's what fatigue is. Fatigue is actually a freeze mode because it's the body putting the brakes on something happening that is causing a somatic error that you cannot deal with on an automated level. And so therefore it is being brought to consciousness so that you can put the brakes on and deal with the thing. Not keep doing what you're doing, but deal with the thing. And you'll notice that's how fatigue works. Like so you feel fatigue, you're crashing because something actually crashed you. And if you look, usually you know, right? Well, it was because I had to deal with my boss or whatever. You deal with the thing and suddenly you feel a lot less tired. Why? Because your system was like, oh, we dealt with it. That's what we do next time this happens. So now we know how to do it. We will not act this way toward that event. We will act this way, which makes us feel better. We solve the somatic error, and then suddenly you're less tired because you made the executive decision to deal with the problem one way or another. That allows the system to understand, learn from it, put it in automated, and then we keep moving forward. And that's really what fatigue is. It's just bringing about an unchecked somatic error to consciousness so that we can make an executive decision about it. So where does that play in training? Well, a lot of time, not always, but a huge portion of the fatigue that you feel at the high volume comes from that. It's actually a freeze mode. It's not a fatigue caused by exercise per se. The fatigue is caused because you are taking your exercise, the intensity, because you have to do 5 more reps, into the flight zone. That's where your fatigue comes from. It's not the volume itself, it's you spending too much time into the flight zone. You are taking, like you're doing that extra 2 reps that go past your fail. So that's why some exercises won't make you that tired. You notice this, I'm sure. You can do maybe, if you love the squat or whatever, you can do 10 sets of squats. You're sore as hell the next day, but you're not tired. You're just like, I'm really sore. Like you can barely move, but you're laughing about it and you can't wait to go back to the gym. Whereas you do bicep curl, you do 4 sets, and that night you're kind of crashing, or there's a specific exercise, emotional mapping, that targets your glutes and you're like, and then suddenly you can't do it. Right, you'll notice that your fatigue is very, very selective. And the reason is because it's not the physical one. It's because you went to flight and flight led you to freeze, to crash, because the somatic error was left unchecked. And that's what causes the going to the flight. That's what really that sense of self is there to analyze, is that somatic error. Right? That's the important part. And so volume can kill you if, or let me put it this way, volume will not kill you if you can find a way not to go into fail. And so if you find a way not to go into fail, so some exercise will take you fail, others will not. If you can find the root cause of your fail and never go there, you will see that you can increase your volume tremendously and never be fatigued. And that's the key. So right now I'm going on I have my Q-1 training in the morning, and then I have my gym session 5 times a week. And right now I usually go do cardio at night, and I'm adding another session because my capacity for volume has increased tremendously. And I'm eating the same way. I'm actually getting leaner, and my strength is not falling. I'm having a hard time being as strong as I was, 20 pounds heavier, obviously, but I'm just starting. This is week 6. Give me 6 months to a year, and you'll see that my strength will be up, but this time I'll stay lean because I like seeing my abs, thank you. But the point of all this is that the Q training is allowing me to do a volume I never could touch before. So if you remember in podcast, I talked about the fact that I could always do strongman training. And I'm realizing why now. Because strongman training I could do 3 times a week, it didn't bother me. Obviously my soft tissue were not always happy, but it didn't bother me. Why? Because it was always carries. And carries, there's no rep counting. There's a line to go to, but there's no rep counting. So I could never fail a carry. I might stop before the end of the line, but it didn't bother me. I would just take 3 breaths, chalk, regrip, and finish in that sense. And so I wasn't timing myself or anything. I just had to do a distance, and if I had to stop, I had to stop because I like to go heavy. But so there was no fail for me in my case, right? There was no fail for me like there is in in powerlifting, for example. Powerlifting is that weight for 3 reps. Then the week after that, I did 3 reps, but now I got to do 4, but I can't do 4. It's been 4 weeks and I'm still on that 4. Does that mean anything? Am I working for nothing? And then the voice starts talking in my ear, and then I start to freak out. And guess what? I get exhausted. And now I realize why powerlifting was murdering me versus strongman, to the point where I would do a squat session, be tired, and do 2 hours of strongman and be fine. But it was because of that angle, that approach that I took to powerlifting, where it was always like I wanted, to go up always in weight all the time, which was ridiculous, obviously. That's my fault completely. But I just did not take that approach to strongman. I enjoy carries and strongman so much. I was doing it for fun, and I like being strong, so I was like, oh, let me go heavy. But there was never really an objective, right? So that conversation could go toward constraint versus objective. If you look at constraint in strongman, whether at objectives in powerlifting, that's really what killed me. In strongman, when I wasn't doing good was when I was going stuff overhead, because I always wanted to go heavier, and so I wasn't setting up my training properly. I wasn't setting up properly because I had just too many fails. Right? I was reaching that flight mode every time, which crashed me and eventually made me quit. I realized I was doing that with jiu-jitsu. The second I was like, okay, world championship and stuff like that, suddenly was training about competition. He was training about points instead of the art of jiu-jitsu, and that's why it crashed me. So you could see where the fail was, right? The fun was gone, and that's my fail. It's not your fail, but it is my fail. But now I'm understanding exactly where that fail is, and I'm removing it. That's what I'm doing on the Q-1 first thing in the morning, is I'm setting the training for the day. Then I go to the gym, and all the compound I do not take them to failure. I do not fail a rep, right? If I have to just, muscle, do a weird stuff like that, that would be a rep. It would not feel good. It would not be good. I don't do it. And then suddenly I can do 4 sets of 4 sets of 5 reps on almost all my, most of my assistance work, right? Maybe on the last one I go a bit higher, but always focusing on, moving correctly. So my whole thing is there, and I find myself doing decent weight for compound movement after compound movement, and of course being blasted physically. Like it was a lot of bench this morning, and I feel it like physically when I move, but mentally I'm not tired at all. I'm gonna go back to the gym later, because I didn't have time to do my assistance work for arms. So I'm going to go to the gym, do arms, and then do my cardio. I'll do some calves. And suddenly, I want to go to the gym. And will I be tired at the gym? Well, yes and no. I feel my body, but am I tired mentally? No. And I can tell you, I'm going to blast it. I'm going to blast again. And I'll have some fruits, and I'm ready to go. There is no fatigue in Q training, right? And that's the biggest thing. Once you can remove that voice that keeps blabbing right in the back that I was talking about in the last podcast, the fatigue goes away. That's what fatigue is. It's the freeze mode. It's that voice that just keeps talking to you and it drains everything out of you, because that's his job. That's the diva brain. And the diva brain, his job is to take the energy that you want to take for training and put it toward cognition. That's evolution 101. It's very hard to fight. And the reason it's so hard to fight is simple, is you're going to the gym explaining to the diva brain that, when you lift heavy weight, that the bear is coming. But where's the bear, right? Like the diva brain is asking, rightfully so, I guess, where is that brain? Where is that bear? Like, where is that zombie that keeps chasing you, that you keep saying that I need to divert my energy to the body so that you can fight, right? Because that's going under the squat. You're going to have to convince yourself to bring the maximum fight, because that weight is heavy. All the visualization that is required before lifting, that takes energy from the diva brain. And it's like, well, no. And because there is no bear, like, to be sampled, it becomes harder and harder and harder in training. And so suddenly you have that training session that you're supposed to go, and instead of going like, oh, let's do this, I can't wait, it's like, all right, let's do this. And now you're starting to feel like, you're quitting. And then because you feel like that, you need to push the thruster a little bit. So now instead of going to the gym at a 6, going, let me enjoy this, you have to force yourself a bit. So now you're at an 8, right? And then that that makes the diva brain bitch a little bit more, because now you're dipping into reserves that you shouldn't be dipping into, and that's where that adrenal fatigue that they talk about really is you're starting to scare yourself a bit in order to be able to train when really you don't want to, because you're going to flight too much in your training, and then all those things accumulate. So imagine if I could up your volume of training, but not your fatigue. Imagine skill-wise, how much more we could do. Imagine hypertrophy-wise, what we could do. And all that stuff is feasible. Like, I've had a very good experience on myself and on Janina with this now for 6 weeks. And I'm starting to see the impact of Q tuning on my private clients, and it works really well. But the key of all this is the fail, is to not go into flight. If you do not go into flight, the results are, shall I say, mind-boggling. We can push fatigue back a lot through Q training. It does require you that you find exactly what the fail is, and without the lactate testing, it's very hard. Actually, it's feasible, but it's very hard. So there's a huge amount of time spent at the beginning trying to figure this out, right? But once you know where to go, where not to go, things fall into place really nicely. And I'll just use my experience. The amount of volume, like, I'm someone who could not do bodybuilding for more than 3 weeks at a time, because I would just crash. I would feel fatigue and crash every time, which I understand, because for me, it was always starting counting reps, and then 15, I have to do 16, because last time I did 15, so I come back and I'll do 16 this time. And then I would go into that weird mindset toward it and not understanding anymore, why am I lifting? I don't see my muscles growing. Of course you don't, because you did it for 2 weeks, but that's past the point. And I would just put all that pressure on me that would just take me to flight and crash me, and then after 3 weeks I can't. I'm at 6 weeks increasing volume still. I'm increasing volume versus week 1, and I keep increasing, and like, oh, I'm going to go back to the gym and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. I keep popping up the volume because it works. I am not fatigued. That allows me, that makes me think that I can achieve a lot more skill-wise, even to our powerlifting, strongman, even staying at a much lighter weight, because I'm under 100 kilos right now, versus the 106, 108 that I was the most comfortable at for strength. Smaller waist means powerlifting is hard right now, but the numbers will go back up, because I can do a volume even in powerlifting that I could not do before. And you could see even like the immune response to that, like the achy joints, the all that stuff. Yes, I was handling much heavier weights then, but there is a response from my body now that is so mellow compared to then. And I'm training hard. I'm just, again, not the same weights, that's true, but I'm training really hard. And my immune response system, my overall like sympathetic response to training, right, to my recovery and stuff like that, is not even close. Like, I've no achiness, everything feels great, I can move, I'm running very well, my cardio is going very well. Yeah, I'm doing cardio as well. I'm doing my Q-1 in the morning, but like 15-20 minute run on the beach at night, stuff like that, and it impacts me in zero way. I'm more energized out of it. I understand why I hated cardio, because that thing put me in flight, I think, more than anything else. Like that steady pain that you keep for 20 minutes, I thought I was going to shoot myself. But now that this silence, right, that the Q training gave me, I can run. I don't know that. I don't want to run more than 15-20 minutes, by the way, but I can run at a decent pace. No, I'm not, Wim, before you asked, no, I'm not running a marathon. But I do enjoy that 10-15 minutes, 20 minutes maybe, of run on the beach, because, you know, the waves, the moon, or the sunset, or whatever it is, and the silence. I am enjoying the silence so much. If you can find that silence, you will find yourself upping your volume tremendously. I can promise you that one. Thank you, guys.